This Saturday, November 18th, the Qaumajuq Museum at the Winnipeg Art Gallery will open a brand new exhibit called Dark Ice. This is a collaborative exhibit that was conceived by artists Leslie Reed of Ottawa and photographer Robert Kautuk of the Kangektugapic Clyde River, Nunavut, in collaboration with the Ottawa Art Gallery. Dark Ice is an examination of the profound and drastic impact that climate change is having on our ecosystems, and in particular, how the land, ice, and communities of the North are affected by man's impact on the planet. Joining me here over Zoom to talk about the Dark Ice exhibit, I am joined by Katryna Barske, who is a public relations officer for the Winnipeg Art Gallery-Qaumajuq. Hi, Katryna. Nice to meet you here over Zoom.
Hi, yes, thank you for having me.
So the Dark Ice exhibit sounds really interesting. I want to first start out with how the Winnipeg Art Gallery found out about the exhibit, and can you talk about some of the planning that went behind getting the exhibit here?
For sure, yeah. So our curator of Inuit art, Darlene Coward-Wright, had heard about the exhibition, and she was initially really interested in the idea of a Southern and a Northern artist working together and sharing different perspectives on climate change. And then we received the proposal from the Ottawa Art Gallery. The show would be traveling, and it checked all of our boxes in terms of a theme, timeline, programming, and now the show will be opening up this weekend. So we're really excited for people to come and see it.
The exhibit features the art and photography of two people with very different backgrounds. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between Leslie Reed and Robert Kautuk's backgrounds?
Yeah, so Leslie is from Ottawa, as you mentioned, and she's a pretty established artist in that city. She trained in England and taught at the art department in the University of Ottawa, and she grew up taking trips with her family to an island in Quebec. And that's kind of when she first kind of fell in love with the idea of art and noticing light and space and be inspired by that. Her father was also in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and he
Yeah.
mapped flights during the Cold War. So she kind of comes from more of a research or academic background. And then Robert is from Nunavut, and he has been taking photographs for his entire life. He is a self-taught artist who started using disposable cameras, and he had to, send the film back, and it would take months to get the photos developed up north, especially. And then he eventually began experimenting with digital cameras, and then now he uses drone technology. And he's really interested in seeing more of a bird's eye perspective of things. So it's just interesting to think, like, even how much technology has changed in his lifetime, but that he's still kind of limited to 20 minutes with his battery life with the drone photography with the colder temperatures. So it's interesting that, we have that evolution, but there's still kind of those drawbacks, I guess, of the new tech versus the old tech.
Yeah, it's a bit like having a phone outside in 40 below weather. The phone will shut
Exactly.
down, and it's the same thing with a drone.
Yeah.
Um, Do you know how the two of them met and decided to put the exhibit together? And my understanding is they put it together in collaboration with one of the curators at the Ottawa Art Gallery, Rebecca Bassiano. Can you talk about that and how that went together?
Yes. So originally, the curator, Rebecca, she's works at the OAG, and she was working with Leslie already on a couple different projects. And she was doing some studio visits and saw Leslie was working on some new things that were inspired by the North and about climate change. But they didn't really want to create a show that only featured a Southern perspective. So they began researching Inuit artists, and Robert's name kind of kept popping up, and they gave him a call, and he was interested right away. And so the show it came together during the pandemic. So the artists didn't actually meet until the installation was kind of coming together.
Mm.
So when they were actually kind of in the same room together, Leslie and Robert, they decided to collaborate on one piece. And we actually have that in the show at the Winnipeg Art Gallery as well. So you can kind of see there's the Southern perspective and a Northern perspective kind of coming together in this one collaborative work that's on view. And I think it's really indicative of what the whole show is about.
Mm-hmm. The exhibit has many different elements. There's photography, there's video, there's paintings, and some sculpture. I'm thinking in particular of those arranged photos of the Antiquarian fossils that Reed has arranged. Can you talk about where exactly in the gallery the exhibit's going to be shown?
Yeah, so I actually just took a sneak peek earlier today for the first time for me.
Mhm.
Our prep team is just putting the final touches on it. It looks amazing. But one thing for me is the works are always so much larger than I think that they are because you see them on a screen or in a catalog and you read how big it is, but you don't put that in your mind all the time. So they really are larger than life. And the whole show, it takes over two galleries spaces in our gallery. So it's actually in the original WAG side of the building in galleries 5 and 6.
Okay.
And I was also talking with a curator this morning, and she mentioned that for a show that's about ice, it's actually quite warm in terms of how it feels. There's a lot of warmer elements to it, like there's fabric banners, there's projections and light boxes. So it makes it a lot more inviting than people might think for an exhibition that's about ice.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's a really nice feel. A lot of contrasts.
Mm. Climate change is one of the main themes of the exhibit, and there's many ways that that it's explored, shown in the photography. Whether it's receding glaciers and the crevices that are created as a result. There's aerial photos of ice in different seasons, and there's also the effect that climate change has on northern flora and fauna. Is there one piece in the exhibit that drove this theme home for you from what you've seen? And what have you taken away from the exhibit yourself?
Yeah, like honestly, every work in this show is so breathtaking. But I think one of my favorite pieces that I've seen is by Robert, and I think it's called Psychut. In English, it's Different Layers of Ice. And it's a drone image that captures so much. You see kind of the progression of the ice through time. So you kind of see a snow-covered ice that I think we're used to seeing in a lot of pictures of the northern landscape, but then throughout the span of the image the ice changes and you can actually see the effects of climate change and how fragile it is all in one image. And the exhibition is called Dark Ice because as the ice gets thinner it gets darker, and the darker surface absorbs heat faster, which makes it melt faster. And it's such an image that really just kind of captures the whole thing in one shot, and it's just so much more than what or what I at least have seen, just browsing the internet when you kind of are in those climate change kind of conversations.
Yeah, and I saw an interview with Robert Kautuk, and he was talking about how the ice used to be predictable. It used to, you could predict yearly. It was sort of the same thing. And he says now it's much less so. It's really fascinating. Um, Aerial photography takes a big role in the exhibit. We've talked about this before. Robert makes use of drones. And one of the things I found really interesting is Leslie Reed juxtaposes historical pictures that were taken by the RCAF against current pictures that she took herself. Can you talk a little bit about how these two approaches differ?
Yeah. So they both have different methods of working, obviously, but at the heart of it, they're both mapping and documenting the Arctic landscape kind of as it changes through time. So Leslie has a bit more of that research background and ties into the Air Force. She looks at the impact of colonialism and climate change on the North from a more historical perspective. And her photographs are also mostly taken from the land or sea. And then Robert offers a deeper community take. So his family has been living in Clyde River for generations. They have lived through the effects of climate change up north. And he also mainly uses drone photography. So you get that mix of land, air, and sea perspectives. And between the artists, you see these different perspectives tell a unified story, which I think is really beautiful. It's not just one person's job to work on this problem. It's something that is going to take a collaboration from North and South, which is exactly what they're doing as artists, but also what we kind of all have to do collectively as well. We need to learn how the northern communities use the ice, read the ice, learn from the ice, and also how they're adapting to the changes, as you mentioned, and kind of shifting to be in a new relationship with the land and environment. And then maybe we can better respond, from the south with the resources that we have available to us and, just have a better working relationship.
Mm. One of the things that really struck me is it's not just like you think ice, it's going to be white, but there's the different colors and textures of the ice, but it's textures in particular. There's not only the ice, but there's the gravel juxtaposed against the ice. And one of the things that really struck me about Robert Kautuk's pictures is that They look like they could have been taken from 10,000 feet up, or they could have been taken from 200 feet up. Either way, the contours and the ice come through. Can you talk about how he uses these pictures in relation to his own community? I'm going to give the name of his village another kick at the can, Qaumajuq, and the survival of the Inuit communities of the North.
Yes. So as we have established, I'm also not very great at pronouncing the community, Qaumajuq. He's lived there for many generations, as his whole family's lived there for many generations. And that community aspect really comes through in his work. His photography is documenting the changing environment, which can also help further inform the community itself and how they respond and adapt. Another interesting thing about his work is, even though it looks like these big expanses of land that, it's kind of seems almost empty and barren, we do still see a lot of that community aspect come through. And actually, in each work that is from Robert, it actually features himself. You can see him controlling the drone from below, which is kind of inserts himself into those images. But you can also see other community members, people that are as much a part of the themes of the show as the climate is. It's all interwoven. We have the people aspect and the community all in conversation with each other. And it's just really important for the curator and the artists, and for us as well, to have conversations and consultation with Indigenous communities, especially in regards to climate change. I know a few years ago there was a seismic testing that was taking place in Clyde River, and they actually took it to the Supreme Court, the community did, and they won. And, that it's stories like that, when, these conversations can be so heavy, but it just offers some inspiration that, communities can kind of move things forward and take action and take it into your own hands, which I think is what, they're trying to get at with this exhibition as well, to inspire not just conversation, but inspire taking action as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There are two major installations in the Dark Ice exhibit by Leslie Reed. There's that huge landscape portrait of like that 15-kilometer Dahlgren Glacier, or this huge stretch. It's painted on brushed aluminum panels, and then there's another one of the Bellet Strait. Can you talk about those two images in the exhibit a bit?
Yeah, so the Dahlgren Glacier it's actually a panoramic photograph that's printed on the aluminum panels. And I just went up there a couple hours ago, and I noticed, even though it's, a snapshot in time, the way that the light in the gallery kind of goes over as you walk by, it reminds you, it gives it movement, and it reminds you that, time isn't standing still, even though the photograph portrays it that way. So we do need to, again, act and mobilize and kind of bring forward that kind of energy. But the photo in particular is actually a very eerie photograph. It's this massive calving glacier that takes your breath away and really puts the climate change in perspective. And the other one, the painting, it's a phenomenal painting. She had mentioned, actually, this is in the catalog, that she was, as they were sailing through it, she just remembers like watching the satellite ice map to see if they were even going to make it through, and just how nerve-wracking that is. And so she said it's like seeing the top of the world, but it's falling off. And that just kind of speaks to what's happening in the Arctic, that with climate change, there is no certainty. There is no passage through that anybody can really predict. And I think it's just such a beautifully captured moment that she's brought to the show.
Yeah, it looks so straight, the Bellet Strait painting, but apparently it can be quite rugged, and you can only go through it in high tide, right?
Yes.
It's crazy. If there's one thing that you hope people are going to take away from the exhibit, what would it be, and what message do you hope that the exhibit will get across?
Yeah, I really hope that the show kind of acts as a conversation starter for people, and that the conversation eventually turns into some sort of action. And I know climate change isn't a new topic, but it's not one that we're always talking about with our friends and family, or in a gallery setting as well. So I hope that by kind of seeing the collaboration between North and South, and having those perspectives kind of come together and be presented in such a beautiful exhibition, that it'll inspire more collaboration and consultation towards the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Katryna, the Dark Ice exhibit sounds like it's going to be just amazing. I'm planning on going. Where can people go to find out more details, and how long is the exhibit on for?
Yeah, that's great. The show officially opens on Saturday, November 18th, and it's on until May 26th. So there's quite a few opportunities to come and see it. And we will actually have Rebecca Basquiano, the curator, in on November 30th and December 1st to give a curator talk and tour. And the artists will be there as well.
Wow.
And you can also pick up the catalog in our shop. I believe it's $20 if you want to delve in further, but you can find everything on our website at wag.ca.
And for our Classic 107 listeners, the pictures that I've seen of the exhibit are absolutely striking. Katryna, this has just been so great. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
For our Classic 107 listeners, I have written an article about the Dark Ice exhibit that can be found at classic107.com. And in the article, I've embedded a direct link to the Winnipeg Art Gallery-Qaumajuq site where you can find out more details about Dark Ice. Katryna, thanks again.
Thank you.